Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Suzanne Vega with us today. We'll chat with her in just a moment. But first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Suzanne Vega emerged as a leading figure of the folk music revival of the early 1980s. Since the release of her self-titled, critically acclaimed 1985 debut album, she has written and recorded numerous songs that have become part of the contemporary music vernacular, including Luka, Marlene on the Wall, and Tom's Diner, an a cappella piece that was remixed by UK electronic dance duo DNA and became a major club hit. It remains an oft-sampled and covered standard by artists across the musical spectrum. Her albums, including her self-titled debut follow-up, Solitude Standing, and 99.9 Fahrenheit, have sold millions of copies worldwide. Her most recent album, 2025's Flying with Angels, is out now on Cooking Vinyl to critical acclaim from the New York Times, Rolling Stone, New York Magazine, Forbes, and more. Suzanne, welcome into the back room.
Thank you.
So let's start with the film, Lover Beloved. This is an adaptation of your off-Broadway one-woman play, Lover Beloved, Songs from an Evening with Carson McCullers. You brilliantly and musically portray the writer and poet, Carson McCullers, who at the age of 23 wrote the classic 1940 novel, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Tell us a little bit about Carson and who she was.
Okay. Carson McCullers is a writer, American writer from the Deep South, from Columbus, Georgia, who, as you mentioned, had her most famous novel published when she was 23 years old, which was in 1940. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to know the time that she published and how young she was. Mm-hmm. And in that era, especially, this is way before Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird 23 years later. So similar themes, but very differently handled. So Carson was a very sensitive, brilliant young woman with a lot of health problems and health issues and complicated life. I don't know how much biographical detail you want me to go into, because the movie is about an hour and 15 minutes long, and I could practically do the whole thing. But that would take up all your time.
Let's go. So the movie is such a personal, stripped-down piece. What made you want to step out from behind the guitar and into something more theatrical and exposed like that?
I have trained in many forms of discipline over my life. I wrote poetry when I was about 6, and I think I first saw a stage with a spotlight on it when I was around 4 years old and thought, I want to be on there. I want to be on that stage. I didn't know what I would be doing, but I liked the spotlight, and I thought, I want to go there.
Do you remember any of your 6-year-old poetry?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear something.
Oh dear. Okay. Something about the fairies. It was all very, very young stuff. You put me on the spot here. Now, I was not expecting that question. So
it's okay. We can continue.
Yeah, I had there was one about being alone by the pond, and I don't even have one with being by a pond with the fish, and it would go where the little deer play and all of this stuff. All of that was a complete fantasy since I grew up in New York City. And the only pond I knew of was the boat pond, which, right. There's no deer in it, or sometimes it has fish, but not often. Yeah. That was a fantasy world. Mm-hmm.
The reason I often ask people what they were like as little children, in the single digits, because so many times you hear them describe themselves back then, and it really is like a conduit to who they became when they got older and the work that they've done. And it really is fascinating. Even people in politics, they'll tell you that, when I was 6, I was obsessed with Richard Nixon, and really So I love asking that question.
Yeah, I feel myself to be very like I was.
Mhm.
I remember there being some kind of box in the backyard, and I remember standing up on this box and shouting, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah." Wow, because
Mhm.
I heard the Beatles, and I thought that was super cool.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, the reason I decided to do the play was because I had studied as a dancer for 10 years and especially when I was in high school, I studied Martha Graham technique. Then when I moved to college, I did costuming for a while and then slowly built up the courage to actually study acting. And I ended up minoring in theater there.
Mhm.
So this is way before I'd started writing songs by then, but I hadn't really made a career out of it.
Mhm.
So the the play in its original form was actually my senior thesis in college. And back then, I wrote a half an hour play with 5 songs about the life and work of Carson McCullers. And back then, it was called Nothing Human. And I'd always thought, this is okay, but I haven't really fleshed this out. And so I had a second iteration of that in 2010, and it was called Carson McCullers Talks About Love then. And then we have the third iteration, which ended up in this film, which is called Lover Beloved. So it's been a lifelong theme and preoccupation.
Mhm. I mean, you could have chosen so many different iconic people to write about and perform about. So I'm curious to know what it was about Carson's life in particular and her voice that resonated so deeply with you on a personal and artistic level.
Interestingly, when it started as a class exercise, my teacher said to the whole class, come in dressed as someone in the arts who is no longer alive.
Mm.
So I could have chosen anybody. I could have chosen a painter or a dancer. I could have been Martha Graham. But I saw a picture of Carson McCullers, and I was struck by her partly because I had read a short story of hers called Sucker. And when I read it, I thought, this is a great story. Whoever wrote this story really understands teenage boys. And I thought it was a man who had written it. And I thought it was a contemporary. I thought it was someone who had written it in the 1970s. So when I saw the photograph of Carson McCullers, I realized, first of all, she was a female. And secondly, that she had written that story, Sucker, which I thought was so modern and cool and contemporary back in the 50s.
Mm.
And so once I delved into her biography, I felt some kind of communion with her in a way that went way beyond being just academic. It wasn't like, oh, I think we have certain things in common. I really felt her spirit was modern, and I felt that I understood her and that I could portray that. And that's been a constant thing that has brought me a lot of pleasure um, in my life. And that's the only reason I've done it. It's
Mm.
not as though I expect to get other acting parts or, that I think I'm the next Tom Stoppard. I mean, it's just it's like an obsession.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so obviously you connected so deeply with her. Was there a moment where you thought, wait, this is actually about me too? Like you saw yourself in Carson and vice versa.
I have seen myself in Carson, but I'm also very cognizant of the ways in which our lives are very different. I'd say I'm more aware of our differences than I am of the similarities.
Mm.
I did not have rheumatic fever as a child. I am healthy. I mean, she was someone who had repeated strokes. The end of her life, she was in a wheelchair and she was very, very physically, challenged. So she had a very sad life in terms of her romantic affairs. She was an alcoholic. She had a difficult husband whom she divorced and then remarried. So yes, up to a point,
Right.
I see myself in her, but mostly I love her.
Hmm.
I love her and her crazy spirit for the times. She's bisexual, brilliant genius female, fearless in her art in a way that she was not always able to carry off in her life.
At one point in the film, Carson says, there is a theory of love. There's the lover and there is the beloved.
Yeah.
And these two, they come from different countries.
Yeah.
I really love that. What's the meaning behind that?
Well, I really feel that Carson in her life, in spite of all the love she received from her family, because this is a woman who was well loved. Her mother doted on her. And also she was well loved in her lifetime. When she died, hundreds of people came to her funeral. So in spite of that, she always felt herself to be the outcast. Her characters that she wrote about were grotesques. Even the first one, even the Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which was such a popular book, and deservedly. Somewhere in her psyche, she just felt and alone and sort of embodied the outsider spirit. And that's what she believed. The lover is from one country, and then the beloved is a different animal. I don't believe that myself in life. I believe you can have equal, you can love and be loved in return. This is what I feel. But this was what she felt. And this is what she wrote about from a very young age. And you see it in her face and you see it in her photographs, this tremendous haunted feeling of being just the most solitary creature on earth.
Very kind of a lonely way of thinking,
Very, very alone, very lonely. A lot of her children and people that she writes about are outcasts, people on the fringes of society. There's a kind of an unsentimentality about her writing. Also, the children are always kind of mean and tough. They're wandering around in weird gangs, doing things that bad children would do. I know those kids. I see them in New York. I've been one of them sometimes. But
we all have.
Yeah. So she was so good at revealing characters and parts of life that are real, but they also have another dimension to them.
You've always been seen as a great storyteller. Do you think of Lover Beloved more as a musical, a memoir, or something else entirely?
I think of it as a theater piece with music. It's a theater piece showing the life and work of this woman. And we go off into musical worlds. She was a very musical person herself. She played piano. She's very gifted. I think she even got into Juilliard. And at first, in fact, her mother had pushed her to become a concert pianist. And she wrote some stories about the stress and the pressure of being in that world. One especially called Wunderkind, which is about the anxiety of having to perform at that level at such a young age. So I felt that, mixing Carson's writing world with music was not such a huge leap.
And what's more vulnerable for you, standing on a stage alone in a one-woman show or releasing a deeply personal song or album into the world?
I felt much more revealed playing Carson. Because first of all, once you're on that stage in that character, you have to remain that way for the hour. And when I did the play in Houston, Texas, it was an hour and 45 minutes long. So no matter what was going on in the audience, I had to remain in character. And I'm not one of these people who can just break it and start improvising or, it's a very disciplined, structured situation.
And you memorize all of that. I mean, this is why I never could be an actor. I can't remember 3 sentences. It fascinates me when I see people in a show, when I go to like Broadway or an off-Broadway play. All I think about the entire play, like I can't even enjoy the play because I'm thinking like, how the fuck are they remembering every single thing I'm watching?
Well, I'll tell you a secret. In the beginning, I wasn't remembering it. I was forgetting a lot of it. And so I kept asking line, 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 line. So finally, we had a little system put in where I had my in-ear monitor. And if I said the word gosh, that was their cue to feed me my line in the in-ear monitor.
Awesome.
Well, during the previews, I stood there going, gosh, and I heard crickets. It was nothing. And I was standing there going, gosh, gosh,
Bathroom break.
nothing. So I got myself back on that bicycle. The word, the whatever, the right word popped into my mouth.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm never doing that again. And I made sure that I knew my lines. And from that moment forward, I knew my lines.
You know, I produced a film a while back that Meg Ryan starred in, and I had this conversation with her. I said, "How do you memorize this stuff?" And she started explaining her process, which I thought was
Do calves.
bonkers and fascinating at the same time. She said, first I load the whole script into my head, and then I like move it to the back. And then when I get my dailies, like I bring up parts to, it's like, it sounded insane, but it also sounded completely logical if you're an actor. And I started to just visualize, like, how is she doing that? But it was fascinating to hear her process.
I would wonder also, is she using aids? Does she drink coffee? Does she take memory supplements? I'm be curious, but
I mean, there are people that just have incredible photographic memories and they can do things. I mean, I think about that with lawyers, how they are able to just pull cases out of, when they're in front of a jury and talk about and memorize everything. And so that's a real skill. But has doing Lover Beloved changed the way you think about your own catalog? Like, do you now see your older songs differently?
I don't see my older songs differently, no, but I perform them a little differently sometimes. A song like Left of Center now is more fun because first of all, I never played the guitar in that song, so I always had the freedom to walk around if I wanted to. Since doing the 10 years of the play in various productions between 2010 and 2020, I learned a lot. I learned how to make mistakes. I learned how to make them in rehearsal. I learned how to save myself on stage if something went wrong during a performance. And so now I really have fun on stage. When I'm playing with Jerry and I'm singing my own songs, I can sing left of center. I move around a lot more. When I sing I Never Wear White, I go right up to the audience and I sing right into their faces. And a lot of times they're a little surprised. I don't take it further than that. I don't, like, get in their lap or go, jump off the stage, but I do kind of confront them for a minute. And that is fun.
Yeah, so let's talk about your music for a bit. I remember when Luka came out back in '87. My daughter Emily, my first child, I had just had my first child. She was born shortly before that, and I wept when I heard that song the first time, and I've been weeping ever since. Anytime I hear it, because I found it so haunting, as did millions and millions of people. Did you have any sense that a quiet, intimate song about child abuse would become such a massive mainstream hit around the world?
I personally did not, especially when I first wrote the song. I had been listening to a lot of Lou Reed's Berlin album. In that album, he's writing through characters and they're in a domestic abuse situation. He's also playing acoustic guitar. He's also assuming a character in a female voice. So from listening to the Berlin album over and over again, I felt comfortable doing what I was doing. I was writing a song on the acoustic guitar about domestic abuse, and I was assuming a male persona. And I thought, okay. So I thought of it as like another song on the Berlin album. I don't think anyone else saw it that way. The one who saw the potential in it was my manager, Ron. He heard me sing it during a show in the '80s, And he just point blank told me, I think that song could be a hit. And I said, why? He said, it's a song about an issue. And in the 80s, we need more songs about issues. And we had this discussion about whether music actually made a difference or didn't make a difference, because I was skeptical and I kind of felt like, well, I wasn't sure that it made that much difference. And he was passionate and he argued with me and said music in the 70s made a huge difference
Yeah.
in the world. And I realized the depth of his commitment. And I said, okay, as long as I don't have to change myself or change the song, great. And so they did a production on the song, because when I played it, just myself and the guitar, to be honest, people looked embarrassed or sad. They would look down at the floor. They always wanted something else afterwards, and very few people asked for it. But once they wanted a radio-friendly production. So I think they had been listening to a bit of U2 and some other songs of that era, of that time period. So they wanted it to hit so that it would be, once it went to radio, that it would fit among the other songs, which it absolutely did. So that took about 2 years to work on that production to the point where it could be played on the radio.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just such a beautiful melody. I mean, there are a lot of people that listen to songs and love songs, and if you ask them what is a song about, they can't even tell you. Not your song. I'm just saying music in general. They're so caught up in the melody, and they don't even listen to the lyrics. And it is a beautifully written song, not just lyrically, but melodically. It is just, you just get sucked into it, and then it builds at the end, and your voice rises, and it's just so beautiful. But over the years, we've learned from you that song wasn't about a young boy named Luka, but rather a young girl named Suzanne. Why did you first choose to keep your secret private this way? And then what made you eventually reveal it?
I was young when I wrote the song. I was 24. This was before I had my first record deal. I had not been living on my own very long. I don't like confessional songs anyway for myself. From my work in the theater, I was excited by the idea of a dramatic monologue. I think I took a course in dramatic monologue. And so the idea of writing in other people's voices was something exciting to me. So I thought, I want to write about child abuse. I want to write about my own experience, but I do not want to come out and make this all about myself. That was the last thing I wanted. So I created this character based on a boy in my building. There was a boy, his name was Luka. He lived in my building. He himself was not abused. But
did he actually live on the second floor?
He lived upstairs from me, but I lived on the ground floor, so everybody lived upstairs from me. So I don't know what floor he lived on, but I think second floor sang pretty well, better than third or fourth. So, so I thought, that's how I'll do it. And when I saw the boy himself, he had this. First of all, I like the name. The name was universal. You couldn't tell if it was male or female. You couldn't tell what the nationality was. It's not a Puerto Rican name. It's kind of an Italian name, but then again, it could have other. It has, for example, Luka, I think in Indonesian means wounded, which I didn't know. But it had something universal about it to me. And I thought this would be a good song to sing, a good name to sing in a song. My name is Luka. Better than, say, Bob or, any other name. So it all came together. And plus, I didn't want to reveal my family. I didn't want to shame anybody. That's not what it was all about. I wanted to write about the reality of it, but I didn't want it to be about my own personal situation. So decades went by, and I always told the same story. There was a boy named Luka. He lived upstairs from me. He was not abused. And most people would stop asking questions at that point. But I was confronted by a historian called Kevin Matthew Burke, who was doing a podcast for the Museum of the City of New York. And he had done some research different than what a journalist would do. Uh, he had and uncovered this idea that I was Luka. And he came to me and he said, I'd really like to interview you for this podcast, but I know that you're Luka, and I would like to talk about that. He says, you can turn it down if you want to, but this is where I'd like to begin. So this was in 2019.
Wow. That's
And
cool.
I thought, okay, it's time, because I had started over the years to feel that while I wasn't lying, that I was misrepresenting the truth of the situation. And I didn't want to die not having, to have it be some kind of mystery. I thought I'll just very simply go with this because I think it's time.
It makes you wonder, like, if a songwriter had come out with a song like that today, would it be about them? You know, like, we're living in different times today where everybody is trying to be very sensitive to all the problems that we all have, mental illness and child abuse. You
Yeah.
know, would that be, I mean, you see it with comedians. There are so many amazing comedians who have entire shows that are on Netflix and HBO about their mental health issues. You know, John Mulaney, Gary Goldman, uh, pretty well-known comics. And it's just interesting from a generational standpoint. Like, you know, if you had come out today as a singer-songwriter, would you have revealed it about yourself from the get-go, you know?
I don't think so.
Interesting.
I think I have a very reserved nature.
Yeah.
And I was going to say this before when you said to me, which is more revealing, to go on stage and reveal a personal song about yourself, or I feel much more revealed as Carson, because I work on the songs and I work on it almost as though they're a piece of sculpture. So when they come out, they're separate from me, and I know that they'll stand up on their own. They don't. It doesn't depend on me to give the backstory. There's one album that I made, the Songs in Red and Gray album, which I think is mostly confessional songs from my life, songs about my recent divorce at that time. And I wondered if it would make a difference to the public, and it didn't seem to make any difference at all, to be honest. No one said, "Oh, wow, finally we get the real Suzanne Vega." No, it didn't seem to matter at all. So I prefer a little bit of distance, frankly.
Yeah, you know, it's a really interesting way to think about it. And, you know, I had an experience myself with something like that. My late wife was the actor and filmmaker Adrienne Shelly. She made the movie Waitress with Kerry Russell, which went on to become a big, huge record-setting Broadway musical that was
Yeah.
composed by Sarah Bareilles. And a few years ago, I made a documentary about Adrienne, her life, her death, how a
Yeah.
family gets through all that tragedy.
Yeah.
And one of the opening scenes is I went to the theater on Broadway where Waitress was, and I wanted to see how many people actually knew who Adrienne was. And I would literally say, "Do you know who Adrienne was?" And I would stand under the marquee where it says, based on the movie by Adrienne Shelly. And
Yeah.
most people were like, "No, who's that?" And I got so angry. And I also had interviewed a friend of mine, actor Paul Rudd, in the film, and he said, "That's okay. Like, when the art can stand on its own, isn't
Yeah.
that the greatest thing that an artist can have?" And it completely changed my perspective. So when you said what you just said, I totally get that. Like, you don't need to have the art be about you unless it's intended that way specifically, that particular art form, because art is universal and the subject matter is universal, and it can and in many ways should stand on its own without you behind it, like pushing it out there that way.
That's what I think. That's what I believe. And the other interesting thing is that podcast, which came out in 2021, I was wondering, like, with all the people who over the years who had asked me personal questions or didn't ask me personal questions, I wondered whether it was going to go viral. And it didn't at all. In fact, people seemed really surprised and sort of like, oh, well, we never knew that,
I
but
wonder if that's also a generational cultural thing where today, like, so many people have come out and said, hey, when I was a kid, my parents smacked me around, or I had dyslexia, or I have mental health issues. Like, it's not as startling today as it might have been back then.
Yeah, and that's frankly was never the point.
Right,
The point was never, did it happen to me? Is that the story I'm telling here? The
right.
story is not that this happened to me. It did happen to me, but look how many other people it happened to. This
Sure.
is something that happens in humanity all around the world
Yeah,
from all different generations.
yeah.
That was the surprise to me. I thought I was writing a small story about a small thing. And instead, I got all this feedback that it was something universal.
Yeah.
And that really changed me. That
Mm.
opened my world. That became my passport to the world. It sort of broke my world open from being this secret. The thing I had tried to hide the most from everyone turned out to be the thing I was known for.
Mhm.
Represent singing about abuse in a song. That was so ironic. I couldn't have foreseen that. Yeah.
How did you feel when it came out? Like, was it like a weight was lifted? Were you happy that the truth was known, your truth was out there?
Yes and no. I felt a relief, and I
Hmm.
felt because so many people responded to it, I felt the communion with all these people. But it was also a kind of a burden because there was this dichotomy of having chart success, which we all had all hoped for, but also I heard so many people's stories. I
Hmm.
received letters. I still to this day receive people tell me their stories.
Hmm.
And there's this shared sense of pain. So that was it was difficult, but on the other hand, it felt very real. Um, so when as my career continued, I wondered whether I'd have other chart successes and whether Luka would be sort of left in the dust, which it never really has been left in the dust. It's still sort of my calling card, along with Tom's Diner, which has its own crazy history.
Hmm.
And
It's got.
I kind of realized that maybe that was my purpose,
Hmm.
was to be here to reveal that truth in that moment. And that's part of what I was meant to do.
Well,
That's what
it's
I'm.
really, in a sense, it's almost like the obligation of an artist to speak truth to power that way, to tell stories so that the rest of us in the world don't feel alone, don't feel like this is only happening to me. Because if we didn't hear those stories from people, if we didn't have songwriters and we didn't have authors and filmmakers, like, we wouldn't know 90% of the things we know that go on in the world and go on with people, because not everybody writes a book, not everybody makes a film, not everybody writes a song, especially one that is a hit or has, I think, 96 million views on YouTube. So it's really, really important. But at the same time, I would gather that it's, you're like filleting yourself when you put yourself out into the world that way. And at that moment, not sure what the reaction is going to be. I mean, now we have the luxury of hindsight, and I
Yeah.
think you're 100% right. The impact of that song and the impact that you've had on so many people, it's immeasurable. But you don't know that when you're
When
taking
you're.
your taking your clothes off, so to speak, and you're standing there naked in front of the world.
Yeah, I never felt that was taking my clothes off because I had the third
Right,
person
right,
puppet. It was look at the puppet. This is what I felt. And
right.
I think in the end, it was the right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I had come out and said, I'm Luka, I don't know if I could have taken the exposure and the glare and then having to deal with family dynamics. And
Sure.
I mean, as it happened, it allowed, uh, I don't know, it would allowed everyone to be happy for my success without the constant poking and prodding of private and painful things.
Yeah. Well, I think you're 100% right, and this will sound weird, but it really wasn't about you. It was
Right.
about you, but it didn't need to be about
Right.
you. And
There's
and your
not.
instinct was right. You trusted your instincts. But I want to ask you, because the song is written with such restraint and emotional subtlety.
Mhm.
Why did you choose to tell it that way, from a child's perspective, in such an understated way, rather than making it more overtly confrontational or political?
I can only tell you that I did what I thought would work.
Mm.
Um, And it was such a volatile subject that I don't think I even had many drafts of it, even in my own private notebooks. This is something I carried around in my head for a while and just played with the opening lines. I didn't even want to write it in my notebook. That's how volatile a subject it
Mm-hmm.
was to me,
Mm-hmm.
just to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the other thing is that I'm always wary of slogans or when I feel that someone's trying to persuade me of some point of view. Uh, I don't like political songs. I like Masters of War by Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we need any other song other than that one? That is the best political song
Pretty
ever.
much, it's pretty much how I feel about
Yeah.
virtually every Bob Dylan song.
Yeah. So why so I was trying to persuade anybody of anything. I was trying to reveal a point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it goes back to that idea of the dramatic monologue where you have it's like a opening of an aperture of a camera for 90 seconds or less. And you put an audience in that point of view. That seemed exciting to me. That was something that I thought I could do. I could make the audience, I could engage them. And I don't even know how I did that, but how I got that idea of the child saying, I live upstairs from you. You have seen me before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm living downstairs from you. And you know what you've heard.
Mm-hmm.
So that, probably from my own life, there were times where the police were called, and I know somebody called them.
Mm-hmm.
So someone heard these things that were happening. So that had always intrigued me, that triangle of like,
Yeah, and that's why it's so haunting, and that's why when I said before that every time I hear that song, it just hits me like a sledgehammer because I can't speak for anybody else, but like I close my eyes and visualize
yeah,
everything you're talking about. And then as a parent, as a father, and especially back then, as a father of young children, I mean, by the time 92 came around, I had three small children. When you start visualizing it and you're hearing this child do just that, laying this guilt on, like you've seen me and you've heard what's going on. It is just so haunting, but yet it's juxtaposed with this beautiful melody and your beautiful feminine voice. It's hard to explain, but it just was magical, even though it was about one of the worst possible subjects in the world.
yeah. Well, I have to say that that when my manager said to me, I think this could be a hit. I mean, I was like, he was the only person on earth who was saying that to me. Uh,
You had the right manager.
I had the right manager, definitely. Yeah. And the right producers. Um, and it all sort of unfolded in this way.
Mm,
The other thing that I felt when it was released, a kind of relief that I did not reveal myself, but also the fear that what if I cracked? What if I couldn't sing it, or if I went blank, or if I started to
mm,
cry in the middle of the song? There were times where I sang for the Grammys and I knew I was singing alone on a stage with just my guitar in front of 6 million people. And I thought, what, that I could just suddenly go blank or faint. I mean, anything could happen. But I never did. I always kept going, kept it together. But there was all these, it was a bit of a tightrope. I
yeah,
felt,
well, that's
I,
really interesting to me. Did you ever, in those moments? I mean, it, it sounds like you were really great at compartmentalizing. Like when you were up there, you were singing a song about a kid named Luka. Like you didn't quite go, or did you ever really go? I'm singing this song about Luka, but I'm really singing about me.
there are times, even now, where when I sing the song, I feel the anger.
Mm,
I never dial that song in. I never just sing it like it's just a hit. I always put my whole heart and whole intention into it because I still feel it. It doesn't go away. Some things lessen over time. And as I said, I feel more in communion now. I can always tell when someone's traveled a long distance to hear that song in particular.
hmm
I just know it. I feel it. When they say I've traveled 2 days to get here, I'm like, I hear you.
So when you're singing it and you feel it, are you feeling it in the sense of like the subject matter or about
as
you?
as a child. Yeah, I still
Wow.
feel the yeah, the anger at and sadness at
Mm,
years. And I mean it when I sing it. I still
totally understandable. Sure.
I mean the song when I sing it.
Yeah.
Um, you
My
know,
last.
but it's all there. It's all contained. That I
Mm,
don't about it on stage. I don't. I mean, the song's over. It's time to go on to Tom's Diner. You know.
yeah. You've had, this is my last question. You've had this impressively long evolving career. When you look back, does it feel like one continuous journey or a bunch of totally different lives stitched together?
Feels like one long continuous journey.
Mm,
I've had to make choices of at various points. Um, the first time I did Carson after not having done it since college, I was a little terrified. I mean, I was like, who am I to put on this wig and go marching around with a Southern accent with a cigarette? I thought, wow, I must be some kind of idiot. But I got past that. And then I see now that I've made choices to go here instead of there, maybe. It's just one great, glorious life that I've had, you know,
mm,
and I feel very fortunate to have that early success. It gave me so much freedom and financial space to where I knew I didn't have to go back to work as a receptionist if I didn't want to, which I prefer what I do now, frankly. So that's how I feel. I feel
mm,
like it's all about the freedom of the art, and it's great being me right now because
mhm,
what I'm feeling on stage, and I'm feeling a kind of satisfaction looking back, saying, "All right, I've done these things, and I'm
mhm.
doing it."
Well, congrats on all your work. Congrats on the film. And I just want to say, as someone who, had his fair share of being smacked around when he was little, thank you for that song and for what you've contributed to a very important conversation in this country for 40 plus years now. So thank you for that. And it's
You
been,
so much, and thank you for revealing so much about your own life. I'm really touched by your story,
yeah,
uh, story you shared about your wife and about all of that. I was aware of the story when it happened and beyond. So I'm really unbelievably moved by your own life story. And so,
yeah.
thank
I have found over the years that everybody's got a story. Some are just worse than others, but everybody's got a story. Suzanne, thank you so much. It's been an honor to chat with you.
thank you.
Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.